Herzlich willkommen zum zweiten Tag der performativen Buchmesse 2025. Mein Name ist Paya Masumi. Gemeinsam mit Alina Buchberger darf ich den Spaß hier kuratieren. Zunächst habe ich einige praktische Hinweise. Die Veranstaltung findet auf Deutsch und Englisch statt. Die Lesung jetzt zu Beginn auf Deutsch, das anschließende Gespräch ist dann auf Englisch. Am Halleneingang, einige haben es ja schon gesehen, gibt es Kopfhörer, über die ihr eine Live-Übersetzung zwischen Deutsch und Englisch bzw. Englisch und Deutsch hören könnt. Ihr könnt, falls ihr jetzt noch keinen Kopfhörer habt, jederzeit während der Veranstaltung aufstehen und euch einen holen. Wenn ihr im Zoom zuschaut, dann könnt ihr auf das Weltsymbol drücken und dort eure Sprache aussuchen. In English again, there's a translation between English and German. You can get headphones at the entrance. Please feel free to get one at any time of the event. If you're joining on Zoom, please click on the small world icon to choose your language. Es gibt außerdem Verdolmetschung in Gebärdensprache, in deutsche Gebärdensprache. Wenn ihr diese braucht, dann setzt euch gern auf einen für euch passenden Ort, wo ihr dann auch gut sehen könnt. Vorne sind einige Sitzsäcke, die könnt ihr gerne jederzeit benutzen. Wenn Personen diese aus Barrierefreiheitsgründen benötigen, würden wir euch allerdings bitten, die dann einmal frei zu machen. Ihr könnt diesen Raum jederzeit verlassen und auch wieder reinkommen. Ihr könnt euch auch sehr gerne Getränke in Plastikbechern mitnehmen. Wenn es für euch keine Barriere ist, dann gibt es vorne am Halleneingang auch noch kostenlose Masken. Da könnt ihr euch gerne eine holen. Diese Veranstaltung ist zweigeteilt. Zu Beginn werden die drei AutorInnen aus ihren Werken lesen. Nach ungefähr 45 Minuten gibt es dann eine 15-minütige Pause. Im Anschluss wird uns dann Assaldar dann für 60 Minuten durch ein Gespräch auf Englisch führen. Ihr habt vielleicht schon bemerkt, ich habe jetzt gesagt, von 3 AutorInnen, eigentlich sollte noch eine Person mehr auf diesem Panel sein. Jedoch ist die Teilnahme von Rami Aschek heute Abend leider nicht möglich. Das bedauern wir sehr, da ich damit auch eine wichtige Position auf dem Panel über Räume des Schreibens und Sprechens fehlt. Wir hoffen, es wird in dieser Veranstaltung trotzdem gelingen, die Abwesenheit palästinensischer Stimmen im öffentlichen deutschen Diskurs angemessen zu thematisieren. Die Bücher der SpeakerInnen findet ihr später draußen auf dem Tisch. Dort könnt ihr sie dann auch käuflich erwerben. Bevor es jetzt wirklich losgeht, würde ich gerne noch ein paar Worte sagen. Zu Beginn vielen Dank an die Panelistinnen, dass ihr gemeinsam mit uns euch auf dieses Experiment einlasst, denn wir wissen, das ist gerade derzeit keine Selbstverständlichkeit. Die Idee dieses Panels fußt auf der Absage der Frankfurter Buchmesse, Adania Schiebli für ihr Werk Eine Nebensache, einen bereits gewonnenen Preis zu verleihen. In ihrem Buch thematisiert Schiebli unter anderem die Vertreibung tausender PalästinenserInnen, ein Ereignis, das im Arabischen als Nakba, als Katastrophe oder Unglück besprochen und erinnert wird. just heute fanden und finden auch jetzt noch anlässlich dieser Nakba viele Demonstrationen und auch in Deutschland statt. Denn dieses Land vergisst nur allzu gerne und sehr oft, dass es einen beträchtlichen Anteil auch an diesem Teil der Geschichte trägt. Doch die Vertreibung der PalästinenserInnen ist längst nicht das Einzige, was medial und gesellschaftlich so gut wie kaum besprochen, tabuisiert oder sogar aktiv thematisiert wird. Ein Beispiel: Antisemitismus wird seit einigen Jahren in der deutschen Debatte vornehmlich bei Linken und Migrantinnen gesucht, während man in Bayern mit antisemitischen Flugblättern im Schulranzen Karriere machen kann. Die aktive Dethematisierung von Diskursen bei der gleichzeitigen Überbetonung an anderen Stellen zeichnet ein deutlich verzerrtes und karikatives Bild. Dabei ist eigentlich ziemlich offensichtlich, dass in diesem Traumaland Betroffene von Rassismus und Antisemitismus deutlich mehr verbindet als trennt. Ein letztes Beispiel: Das Leid an den europäischen Außengrenzen ist eine Randnotiz oder gar als Abschreckung erwünscht. Wir finden es täglich in den Tageszeitungen. Die Menschen, die allerdings dieses Leid erleben, die bleiben oft ungehört, außer es gelingt ihnen ein sozialer Aufstieg und ihr Leid rückt in den Hintergrund einer erfolgreichen sogenannten Aufsteigergeschichte. Umso mehr freue ich mich heute, dass 3 von mir wirklich hochgeschätzte Literatinnen versuchen, das, was oft ungesagt bleibt, ans Licht zu bringen. Damit würde ich euch gerne einmal auf die Bühne bitten und begrüße euch einmal. Herzlich willkommen, lieber Asal, lieber Matti, liebe Mariam. Ich wünsche euch jetzt viel Spaß bei dem Gespräch und der Lesung.
As proper migrants, we're going to switch to English. To write about what we cannot speak of, that is the lyrical title of this panel. And I am very excited and also a bit nervous because I think this combo here is so fantastic in many ways, and I hope I can do justice to these 2 wonderful writers who have both released their books this spring. So we're talking about 2 quite new recent publications. I'm going to introduce my guests finally. Probably I should have done that beforehand, but my first guest is Mariam Aras. She's a literary critic and essayist. She grew up in Cologne, where she still lives. And I actually got to know Mariam through her literary criticism, which was always quite a special, very different sound in German media and outlets. So that's how I got to know her and admire her work. She also served as a juror for the Leipzig Book Fair Award for 2 years. She's no longer part of that, though, because also she worked on her first book, which we're going to talk about today, Dinosaurierkind. You have written for anthologies, but this is your first book release. So, welcome, Mariam.
Thank you so much, Asal.
My second guest is Mati Shmuelov, who grew up in Haifa and lives in Berlin for 12 years. He's been living there longer than I have. Mati is a poet, a writer, and a curator. Among other things, he curated last year's Parataxis Symposium on Hebrew and Yiddish language writers in Berlin. I didn't get to see that, but I heard you on the radio, and I was very sad that I missed it. I think it was really great. And he has published numerous books. Some of his poetry collections have been translated into German, so go and look for those. I have been reading his poetry now, and I truly enjoyed that a lot. They're very witty, very deep, very lovely. And today he's actually here with his debut novel, even though it's 12 books, right? 12 books, but your first novel, The Prize, Der Preis, which was published in Hebrew in 2021 and has just been published now in its German translation. Welcome, Matti.
Thank you very much.
Yes, today we will talk a bit about...
You introduce yourself also.
I'm
Yes, please.
Okay, I am Asal Dardan. I'm also an essayist and writer and translator of recent time. This is my second book, Traumaland, published by Rowohlt. Is an essay on Germany and German's memory culture.
Hence the title.
Yeah, hence the title. My editor is here, and I'm very happy that she's here. And what else? I live in Berlin and on the Swedish island of Öland. I guess memory culture and also political violence, diaspora, these are all topics I think about a lot, and I guess that's also why I've been asked to be part of this panel. We will talk about, I do want to say a German word, Verortungen, which is a very lovely German word. So let's say positions determined by oneself and by others, maybe some positions that we know about, that we feel, sense, decide upon, some that are forced upon us within the German discourse, within what we call diaspora, within the relations to the countries we feel connected to, either by birth or through our parents and grandparents, or just by language, maybe by love. And maybe we'll also talk about being born in a country without necessarily feeling like a native and what that means for someone who writes, and maybe even writes in the language of that country. We will talk a lot about transnational ties and how they show themselves in our personal lives, but also mainly in our writing, or in the lives and the writing of my guests. And I hope that we will also manage to talk a bit about solidarity and resistance through writing, because that which we cannot speak about but write about is an act of resistance, maybe. We will not talk about split personalities and torn personalities between two countries, because we all know better than that. We know that we are curious beings that cannot be split, but are whole and not whole in many ways. Mariam's essay is a personal exploration of political resistance, also of one's own position in that resistance and the line of heritage it means. And it is also a very intimate conversation between a father and a daughter, a very humorous one at times as well, a loving one. It is also a story of exile and preservance, and also a mastery of language, which we will also talk about. Mati's novel is, of course, something totally different. It is not autofiction. I think do you always have to clarify if it's autofiction or not? Do you get asked about your drug consumption?
Yeah, especially from the mother of my partner.
Yeah. Well, I would say there is a lot of Mati in this novel, of course, like any writer. There's a lot of them in any book, but it is not autofiction. It is more of a satire, a very fast-paced satire on the literature world and its mechanisms of success and acknowledgement through awards. But it is also a novel on the life of a migrant and life in Germany. Both deal with the question of identity, how it is flattened, homogenized, instrumentalized, but also about the ways our stories can resist all these hegemonic practices and hegemonic history making. It talks of being a hybrid and a self-image between countries as transnational ties, and I want to quote Gezi. Both books also fight for something one has never had, I think. Okay, Mariam. You ended with diesmal habe ich es nicht auf sich beruhen lassen. To not let things pass, to not just hold your tongue and ignore, to accommodate ignorance. That is something I think that really led you to this book. And I would like to hear about exactly this moment of overcoming that, where you don't comment and let the ignorance pass. And maybe you could kind of go a bit deeper into what that conflict means and how you came to write this book, and whether this little scene you described at that event, if that was part of your motivation for this book.
Oh, thank you. That's a big question. Yeah, I think it was part of it, that little scene, which probably could have been any scene that both of you also went through in your professional lives on literary stages. Yeah, I just picked this one because it was kind of related and fitted nicely into the dramaturgy. Yeah, writing as rage, writing as resistant. That's of course was one motivation to write the book. It was actually, I think, the main motivation, which was the motor behind writing this book, was also, yeah, maybe also rage about the, sorry, my English is very rusty, about the absence of my father's life and his friends' lives, from which I was so deeply convinced that their share in German history is so important, and yeah, with which I experienced not every day, but a lot in my life. And yeah, the political work, like everyday political work, has always been such a huge part of his life. When just actually the day before, he was at my place and helped me to build a new bookshelf, because I moved recently, and he's 80 years old now, but he insists on helping me with those things. And when the evening got later and later. I think from maybe 6:30 onwards, his phone kept ringing all the time. It was never that bad with my phone, and yeah, it's always friends wanting something from him, wanting to edit the text, put it online on their political organization's website, signing off on some other text or something like that. And it's always been that way. And it took me really it took me my whole life until I was a teenager, and then my early life as a grown-up, to realize that this is not the average. And that he's actually doing very important work. And the history of this work, as well as his present work, are nowhere to be found in the outside world. Yeah, that was my main motivation to write the book, I think. But of course, this, as you said, this kind of political struggle, I don't do what my father does. I'm not in that way organized. I'm not now. But I figure political work in a kind of bigger picture, and I see lines between what I do and what my father does, and actually what his father or his mother, the lives that they went through in colonial Iran. And I see those continuities, and of course sometimes it makes me angry, and it makes me angry how we work through all this in German discourse, and what this is we will discuss later, I hope. And nothing seems to get better, and it's getting even worse now in this situation that we're facing internationally. And yes, so writing is a form of resistance, and I think I just took this little scene during that little literature festival and tried to condense or catch those continuities from, I've learned it's called triangle of sadness in English. I don't know is there another word for Denkfalte? I don't know. I just know from the film it's triangle of sadness. Yes, and I tried to draw that line between the triangle of sadness in my father's face and my own.
Yes, that's beautiful. I mean, one thing, or many things, I mean, I learned from you, and something you do in your book, which I didn't do, and I knew you'd tell me off for it, is you do resist through language by, for example, throwing in Iranian words and terms without explaining them. You also don't write Tehran in the German spelling, but when I wrote about Tehran in my book, I thought Mariam will be so upset that I do the German writing, but I can't. I don't have the power to. So I know how difficult it is to not explain oneself or to. So do you find that even in the way you relate things, like for example, you talk about your studies, but you don't really go into the basic, what these studies mean, what you were really studying. Do you feel that is also a political decision? The way because you're not writing in Farsi, you're writing in German, to make German fit your narrative?
Yeah, I think so. And of course, it's a conscious decision I made, and something that was really important for me and kind of at the core of the intellectual decisions I made in the beginning of the project. Yeah, I don't think, I'm not telling you off, of course not.
You're in my head, you're my Über-Ich already.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I'm so sorry for it, Asal. Yeah, I just, yeah, I spent some time researching the history of those German words for other cities, and I discovered that actually the spelling of the German Tehran is, yeah, I mean, it's related to, it's connected to the colonial time. It's colonial times. It's not like with the Italian cities. It has a different history. And I had, in former texts, I had to do this with a footnote, and I'm really happy that my editor and my publishing house were on the same page with me, and yeah, I had to do some explaining, but then it was okay. And my editor was actually really cautious with me, because I'm addressing the whole topic of language and colonial and decolonial usages of language, and yeah, she was really gentle and concerned with not overstepping some boundaries. What was your question again?
You answered it.
Okay,
you answered it.
Good.
Matti, your protagonist also doesn't seem to let things pass easily, auf sich beruhen lassen. We could get a glimpse of it in that passage Maya read so beautifully, where he comments on the Ethiopian and Arab Jews and their position within the Israeli society, and you know, his sarcastic remarks.
Yeah.
Could you describe a bit which thoughts and experiences led you to Khezi as the main character of your novel? Like, how did you come to Khezi, and maybe even this poor writer that gets this, I mean, I wish there was an award with that kind of prize money. Such a big prize, and then the whole, you know, spiraling after that.
Yeah, thank you. So I immigrated to Germany in 2013, and before I immigrated, I already started to write a collection of short stories, horror and fantasy short stories, and I was signed by a big publisher in Israel, and I finished the book after 1 year that I immigrated. And the publisher wanted to submit me my book to the Sapir Prize, which is like the biggest fiction prize in Israel. But then they already in the Sapir Prize, because a year before, in 2014, a guy named Robi Namdar, a Persian Jew, Israeli Jew that lived in New York, won that prize. They closed the boundaries of who is eligible to submit the prize to only people who live within the geographical borders of Israel, or is a residents of Israel, of course. But I was just 1 year abroad, but because I'm a public figure and I had a column in Haaretz that I'm living abroad 1 year, they decided to, when the publisher submit my book, they decided to send me a letter of that I have to answer them within a day to the prize authorities. Why do I submit my book while living outside of Israel? So I was still a resident of Israel, of course, a citizen of Israel, and I felt I felt that it's injustice because, one can, in that time of defining who is resident, it's 5 years. You have to live 5 years and then you automatically lose your residency. So I got the idea of laughing about this whole idea of language, that it's a symptom of ethno-nationalism. So if we talk about transnationalism, it's the idea that one can overcome these imagined ideas of borders, of nationalism, that today, so literature used them in that sense of, for instance, literary prize to narrowing the identity to a physical identity. Yeah, but Chezi is a different character than me. I think the amount of pressure that comes with this shitstorm that follows is winning the prize is huge, and he doesn't stand by the power. I think I'm much more political than him. And then came also his wife, the figure of his wife, Elena, and his mother, and so it's kind of, and they led me into their stories.
Maybe we need to say why there's a shitstorm, or to clarify for the audience what actually happens to him.
So it's kind of allegory to Germany and Israel, because there is a very complicated relationship between two countries, and Israel is very afraid to how Germany positions itself in the world. So when Germany positions itself as a center, or the new literary center of Hebrew in the world, it threatens Israel's idea that that Germany is kind of the negative of Zionism, right? So suddenly the place where the Jews were extinct now holds the position of controlling what is Jewish literature, or Hebrew literature, or even Israeli literature. Yeah, so there's a shitstorm. A lot of journalists call him, and he already been quoted as an anti-Israeli and as a BDS supporter, and a lot of people want to control him because he became like a known figure now, and he's like been like thrown like a ship thrown through big waves of political history, and his relationship is falling down. But I guess there's a lot of inside of me that I understand Chezi, but there's also I wasn't like when you wrote today about a collective idea of dreams, right? And so I'm not the only writer who ridiculized the literary prize after what happened in Israel. So there's another known writer, Maya Arad. She lives in Canada, and she wrote a lot of prose. She's writing every year a new book. She's really prolific and great. And somebody told me that she also wrote a book about prize. And we talked together, and she sent me a book, and she also ridiculized this idea, So it's, of course, writers' feelings ostracized by their own country. And today there is suddenly also an answer when we talk about this literary center in Berlin, because there's a new publisher in Hebrew and German at the same time called Alt Neuland. Like the first book of Theodor Herzl, he was the prophet of Zionism. And it's echoing the idea that Berlin, between the world wars, was the biggest center of Hebrew literature. That's why I co-created this last year, the same day that the bombs fall from Iran on Israel. The day there was a celebration of how the Yiddish and Hebrew scenes are talking with their past, because between the World War in Berlin, Yiddish and Hebrew flourished. So what happened if the Hebrew comes back to Berlin and flourishes? So that's one of the questions that I added.
And which the Israeli, personified by the journalist in the excerpt, Mariam read, Nimrod, Eliphaz, who are very critical of that Israelis would build a new kind of intellectual or literary center outside of Israel. Maybe that is a good cue to talk a bit about something else that connects your books, or which I would like to ask Mariam about, what the term diaspora, because you write a lot about exile, and to me, or I write in my own book that I see a difference between diaspora and exile, because it is both the absence from a country, but exile is sort of underlines the not being able to go back and the loss, whereas diaspora also is something that gives you a new identity. It is a community outside. It is a place away. It is a... So, as the daughter of someone who's been exiled, but you were born in Germany, and you write a lot about the friendships of your father, which were political ties, but which were also intimate friendships. What role does diaspora, which comes from the Jewish experience, but what does that mean to you, and what does it mean for the book you wrote?
Yeah, I'm a kid of the diaspora. For me, diaspora is the cafe which doesn't exist anymore, across from the Central Library in Cologne, where my father and his friends met for some decades. And I grew up playing on the ground of this cafe, and I came to think about it, well, I mean, as an young adult, and for me it was somehow also strange to read, for example, Homi Bhabha or Edward Said, because I mean it was kind of a moment of bliss, because I recognized myself and the community and the context I grew up in. But it was also strange, because it's somehow a strange feeling when you find your own life theorized in a book. Yeah, because it was just for my dad. I think it must have been that kind of strange experience for my dad reading my manuscript, I think. Because, of course, he would never say words as diaspora, that he lives in the diaspora. I think exile for him is that's something that he can relate to. But I mean, yeah, he has built his life here, and Cologne has come to be his hometown, his second home, and it's something everyday life, and that was actually for me the hard part to identify. That was, yeah, to actually identify the political and the connections, and also the noteworthy in the everyday life things. Yeah, and I actually came to see more and more when I grew up as a young adult that other diaspora kids were my community, and they didn't have to be Iranian. It's just the experience of the collective experience of not belonging, and the collective experience of feeling isolated as a kid. And that's so strange, because I grew up as part of this community, and now, with my book published, people that I've known for decades, sometimes daughters, sons, kids from other friends of my dad's text me and say, "Oh my God, you dared to write my history." And yeah, of course, it's made me cry. And I think from a moral point of view, the text already has achieved everything a text can achieve. But it also made me realize that even growing up within this community, you don't have a language for the isolation that you face in the outside world. And even though, and that's so sad. And I hope literature can kind of find a way out of this, maybe for some.
Well, I want to add, because I'm also here with my book, I mean, and one very prominent, I mean, it's even on the cover shows a film still of your father sitting at the university at a speech, which was held because of the Shah's visit in Germany. And I think when we talk about diaspora, one aspect is that people come to you and say, "You've written my story." But what you also do with this book is show that diaspora is not homogeneous, because my story is basically the negative image or the mirror image of it or the other side of the coin, because my father worked for the Shah. He worked for the Savak, and so your father left the country also because of what my father did. But we are both writers in Germany now, and we both, in a way, have to deal with this heritage. Like, you try to do right by your father, and I guess I have to work through what my father's guilt is. And you mentioned, for example, a writer like Nava Ibrahimi, who wrote, and for me, Nava and Shera Bazia, and also you have been, or that I get to read books in German about something that is very close to me, but also far away, helps me understand what it means to be an Iranian in Germany, and why, for example, I had very different experiences as a Iranian born in Germany than you had. And so I guess my hope is also that for the wider German audience, they understand that not all Iranians are the same, or all people that come from Iran, or that there are political, ethnical differences, and that make it very difficult for us to sometimes talk or find a group. So I would like to lead that to you, Mati, because you, unlike Mariam and me, you are actually in two countries, really, in the discourse, you know? I mean, Mariam and me, we're not part of the Iranian cultural scene, like you are of the Israeli and also of the German culture scene. So, and you also are part of the sort of Israeli or Hebrew and Yiddish, right, language writers in Berlin. Would you say you feel a sort of community there, and do you feel that what is attacked in your book is actually something that you cherish, and that what one would call diaspora? And does it in a way also, is it also a bit of a privilege to be away from it, like to not be there, like not only describe diaspora as a void, but also as a gain?
Yeah, I will start with the question of exile, because my mother was born in Baghdad, and we cannot go to Baghdad, so I'm living from exile from the rich 1,000 years of Iraqi Jews living in Baghdad, from the first exile. And my grandfather is also Iranian, from Mashhad, and I cannot go to Mashhad.
The holy city.
And my grandmother, which she married in Damascus, in Jerusalem, but he met in Damascus, is Syrian, and another country I cannot go. So I have 3 countries that I'm living from exile, and 1 country that I cannot go, that I can go, Israel. So it's not only that I represent Israel, or Israel represents me, and I, of course, ridiculize this idea, because Israel sees itself as a European country. And back to your question, look, for instance, when I did the book launch for this book in Berlin, I don't think that most of the people who came were Israelis. I think the Israelis are curious. They won't come to a German book launch, mostly, because I don't know how much they can, I don't know, mostly it's hard for them with German. And a lot of people who, from different other communities came, so I left the question open of languages. So I had a friend reading in German, a friend reading and talking in English, and a friend in Hebrew, reading few things, and Arabic. And a best friend of mine is a Kurdish exiled poet who came and already translated 2 pages into Kurdish. And so you have this multilingual event, and it's also multilingual diaspora. And as you said, we are living within other communities of immigrants who feel more than welcome to share this happy moment, for instance, of publishing a book from one community, but to share it in a broader sense of sharing a circle. Palestinian friends came. There was a Turkish friend of mine who was born in Germany, but he plays the sage, So it was, the extent of Berlin who gives you this wide solidarity between communities. Not only, an Israeli ghetto, so to say. Diaspora is a privilege. It's a Greek word that talks about seeds that have been thrown away and they are going with the wind and growing up in another place. The monotheistic idea of Judaism and diaspora, it's more about galut or galus in Yiddish, which means the ruined temple and everything, or even the dispersion out of paradise, Gan Eden. We can go back to Israel, but Israel changed in the last 12 years, so drastically. I don't have to explain here, and we read it on the news. I tend to stand with my back to Israeli culture, actually. I read a lot of Hebrew books, but I don't update myself as much as I want. I think diaspora for me is, first of all, it's what we have here on the stage, because we all have mixed identities, and of course, we're not talking about ourselves today. It's a lot about how the world is influences us, or even perceives us, or accepts us. Like you said in your article beautifully, Adwa Said, like, I thought about this sentence so much, how much you cannot control how the world is like influence you. Sometimes you could see it with sadness or everything that happens that you don't control. And of course with the Gaza war that I every day takes it to my heart. I just want to say that sometimes I tried in this book to bring something that it's not Israeli, but it is Israel, and it's not German, but it is happening in Germany. And I was happy that when it was translated into German, it had more possibility to be understood, because in Israel, they lack understandable of the brokenness of immigrants. So, for instance, I will never master German. I learned C1, but I cannot never master it, but I can take what I already absorbed from German culture, mix it with the Israeli culture, and something third happening that it's stand in the middle. It's like it's connect to two worlds, or even more to different other worlds like Arab Jews and stuff that we'll discuss maybe later. and try to create something that only art can give a voice, like you said, like this, like something that people feel it every day, but they cannot explain it in a broader sense of writing a novel about it.
But that makes me somehow feel, or I would like to ask you, because you published the Hebrew, Der Preis in Hebrew in 21. And how is your experience now with this book in 25 is talking about Chezi and the prize and the sort of, shitstorm about having a Hebrew, prize for Hebrew language literature in Berlin, and do you feel you're talking about a different book, or are the reactions different, or how does that?
Yeah, the reactions are different, totally. And I feel strange because I wrote it a long time ago. And it's also echoing something else that I wanted to do, and I'm doing something so different today. But I'm very happy and proud that it's entered the German cycle of life, because I think in Israel it cannot be understood like here, because they don't have. Israel is very young. It's not like Germany. Germany is older as a country with traditions, and of course we know the trauma and the wars and the Holocaust, but Israel is a very young country, and they didn't, I think, create it. It's something that I learned after 12 years. They didn't create it, this third space that allows immigrants to be living with their brokenness and to be accepted. So, for instance, I don't know, if Tomer Gad he was nominated with the Bachmann Prize with his broken German, in Israel it never happened that somebody from the Palestinian or former Soviet Union Jews, or even the asylum seekers from Eritrea or Sudan or Congo that crossed the border and seek for a safe place, wrote a novel that broke the Hebrew to that extent. So I think when they translated back to German, they allowed me to be broken, but within the German culture. And I think here immigrants and Germans, progressive Germans, understand it better, because they have here a multi-layered history from the Italians who work here and the Gastarbeiter, Samra Ertan and others who try to use the language to decolonize and the African, of course, diaspora, that everybody is trying to look the way to enter the German without losing their identity.
But I think I can understand that you have that view, but I think it is also very much a process and also a very tough battle. One of the things, Mariam, you mention in your book, what you constantly repeat is sort of like the attempt to write a forgotten generation and a forgotten history into the German history, because it is also part of German history. For example, you mentioned the attack on a restaurant that was a Greek restaurant in Berlin-Schöneberg. I live very close to it, called Mykonos, and this attack is known as the Mykonos attack. It was in September 92 for exiled opposition leaders, some of them Kurdish, all of them Kurdish, some of them Kurdish, died in that attack. It was the Mullah regime that, orchestrated this attack. And so in a way it is German history because it happened in Germany. They were residents of Germany, and you also describe how your father was supposed to be at that meeting, but he and his friend decoded the date wrong, so they didn't show up. They showed up a day later, or would have showed up a day later. How is your perspective on what, I mean, Mati compares it to Israel, to the Israeli climate and his position in Germany. Maybe you would like to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because that's the direction my thinking went while Mati was talking. Yeah, the victims of the Mykonos attack were also kind of double marginalized because they were Kurdish history is marginalized in West Asian as well as in German contexts, and then they were non-white victims of an attack which was executed in Germany, so it was kind of their people business, kind of the Oriental business that only took place in Germany. So that's why I thought about if their names were even named in the news, and I think so what I recollected and researched, they weren't. I think, of course, there is a space here, and that's a space that is created by exiles themselves, how you described it, by those different peoples coming here and creating their own third spaces. And of course, I mean, as children of the first generation, I think we don't have anything to be thankful for because we're actually doing a lot of the fight. But if I'm thankful for anything, then it's that they were able to create those spaces here. But I think, and I'm actually also curious what your experience with your second book is now, after your first book. I think when your first book came out, that was 2020, right?
21.
Or 21, yes. 2020, 21 was for me, it was a period of kind of enthusiasm, I could almost say. I mean, we met on Twitter.
Yeah.
And
good old days.
Good old days. We were discussing all-white panels and all-white book prizes, and there was a kind of momentum when I had the feeling there was a space opening up also in general German public for those discourses. And actually now, after October 7th and with the war on Gaza and the cracks on the student opposition in German universities and the criminalization of the opposition, I feel this space is closing again. Has been closing for quite a long time. And I mean, I'm just repeating some very general phrases. There are no words anymore for the political crackdowns that are going on. And it's always just this, you don't think there's anything worse that can happen, and it's getting worse again.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, time's running away as well, and there were several things I want to talk to you about. On the one hand, the sort of urge to be European that you mentioned in your passage, but maybe I can bring it all together. you have Bashevi Singer as a sort of figure. You quote Said, Mariam, and both are, like for example, Said now, his works are, or his, how you say, Nachlass, is in the Monazensia in Munich, and he's being treated as a Bavarian Munich writer from Munich. And Bashevi Singer, of course, as the only Yiddish language Nobel Prize winner. I'm sure everyone's very proud of him. Whereas Yiddish language speakers, when they arrived in Israel or in Palestine, I guess you told me earlier, it wasn't so easy to just keep on speaking these languages. People wanted that Hebrew is spoken, and
there was a law
the
against
language
Yiddish,
that
actually.
brings. Huh?
In the first years, there was a law against performing in Yiddish in a public space.
So
they were afraid from Yiddish.
So in a way, what maybe we can't go so much into Bashevi Singer and Said themselves, but at least there is a sort of glorification of past figures, which at the time might have not been, or it's easier to glorify and flatten the history and the resistance and the work of people. And at the same time, now we have writers and intellectuals and artists who might do similar things, but are vilified, defamed, deplatformed. Mariam, your novel speaks about that. Your main character is someone who's constantly being threatened to basically be annihilated in 2 countries and literary scenes. And Mariam, you have a direct experience of it. You were in the jury of the Peter Weiss Prize, and the lovely author that you had picked got, criticized for their support of the Palestinian people in a very, later on, of course, everybody knew it was absurd, but at the time it was very effective. And that was sort of the starting point in 2023 for us here in Germany, and since then we can count many such instances. How do you two, who are sort of connected to you through the history of your father, people who have been erased and not listened to and who had to flee because they weren't allowed to speak, and you as someone who comes from Israel and who, has contact and friendships to Palestinian writers and Palestinians and left Jews who are opposed to what is happening. And you both are writing in Germany, where this sort of trend is happening. How do you deal with it, and how do you position yourself in that?
Well, it took me a lot of unlearning to learn that also I am, and as a German Iranian, and that also Iranians in Germany are Ausländer, because as you, Asal, also describe it in your books, we grew up with this kind of sentiments that we are somehow better, that we're the better migrants. As
compared to
Turkish, other Muslim,
working class,
as compared to other, especially West Asian Muslim immigrants. And for me, the consequence is, not allowing this to happen anymore, and to find solidarity with other marginalized friends and writers, and try not to repeat those mechanisms of proximity to whiteness, which actually just repeats and underlines and perpetuates white supremacy. I guess that's the answer in short.
Well, first of all, as an Arab Jew, I'm not existing in Germany and in Europe, so it's even, the Palestinians, we'll talk about how do I approach it, but as I have to approach first where I come from, you know. So I'm coming, even when I was a Jew in Israel, as long as I have also privilege, of course, in front of the Palestinians from 48 and afterwards, after the law of return that don't allow the Palestinian refugees, and today it's the Nakba Day, to come back, 750,000 people. I have a right to return. But I'm an Arab Jew, and it's a different history. And so first I had to find my way in against the whiteness or against the Eurocentric ideas of Israel, and also here of Germany, as they see also only Ashkenazi Jews as their victims, and they don't know nothing about Arab Jews. So I'm still, when I'm performing or reading, I have to explain what is it. So you have the European Jew and you have the Arab Jew, and it's different histories, different moments, and different literature. And I learned 12 years in Israel nothing about Iraqi or Persian or Syrian Jews or Syrian literature, which I belongs to, you know, or Iranian literature, which I belongs to. So it's a feeling of emptiness that you hold, and you have to reconstruct yourself. After I did that and empowered the old Mizrahi Arab Jewish generation from the 70s and 80s, both there and until today I'm part of it. This is my kind of political activism. I could open also to learn about the Palestinian narrative. I won't tell all my history, but after the 7th of October, I was invited by a magazine in Denmark to write essay about it, and I decided to write an essay about this, trying to be understandable to the pain of Israelis, but also to the Palestinians. And a lot of people thanked me about it after I wrote it, and I created an essay with binational poetry from Palestinian and Israelis and Arab Jews, and I wrote 6 articles like that, and I also brought them to Berliner Zeitung. Some were shortened but still published in German. And yeah, the only answer to dehumanization and annihilation is solidarity and resistance, co-resistance, to join the resistance of them, and a non-violent resistance, and to create empathy to their suffering, and not forgetting where you come from, to the fears of friends of mine who cannot read Hebrew on the U-Bahn because they're afraid that they will be hit, you know. So I'm standing between the two communities who in Berlin, and I try to talk about the Jewish life and the Palestinians' life, because I share these two communities, and yeah, and I'm not afraid. So a few weeks ago, I created a night to collect money for the kids of Gaza, and with a Palestinian friend of mine. And I know that some people think that it's crossing the border, but you have to cross this imagined border of nationality and show that there is a big revenue, a big place of growing if you have empathy and compassion. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I think we're at the end of our time, but I would like to still squeeze in one last question, because your protagonist Rezi, actually, he hardly experiences any solidarity, really. I mean, the only person who kind of speaks out for him is a dying Israeli professor, but you kind of feel he's rather doing it to not end up in hell for having orchestrated the shitstorm in the first place, and not so much for Rezi himself, right?
Yeah.
And one question I have is, because your book and also Mariam's book speak of that, is sort of having to, as diasporic communities, having to talk about in-group or community differences and arguments in front of an audience that is not part of it, because we write in German, but for example, monarchists and, communist Iranians, they have their, or Baluchi or whatever, and Persa, or you as well as Orthodox Jews or, conservative Jews and left Jews and Ashkenazi and Arab Jews, and all these. And I feel it weakens us that we cannot have these conversations without having this audience. And the question is, how can we learn to also see these fights as an act of solidarity and stick to them, and not let us be weakened by the audience, by the critical eye of the audience? Do you feel, is that something that you feel that would strengthen you if you could fight a bit more with your own people without that audience, or if you could bear it, or is there too much of a dependency to be able to do that? I know it's a very broad, tough question, but I didn't want to let you go without asking both of you, because your books speak so much of it.
I just spoke. Okay, I think it's colors. I mean, it's a color of reality, and it's to bring to another culture. I mean, it's like a painter, and he or she or they bringing this new palette of colors, and so they want to have this audience sharing the colors. And then, I don't know, somebody, for instance, today can say, oh, I heard something new, there's an Arab Jew. So you go out with it. Today I heard, I won't share what I heard, it said, no, but so we grew up with the Nakba, but today they say the second Nakba, the other Nakba now, and I thought, oh God, it's so sad. But yeah, you learn something new, and you need the audience, because otherwise, like she said, like Mariam said, it's an undocumented history. And then, for instance, now you wrote your father's history, or the community, or the cafe, and I didn't read the book, but what I understood, so you grew up, and then you give the voice to this community, and it's beautiful. And I mean, how can you give a voice without an audience? So even if these arguments are turning apart the community, and it is. I can tell you today, of course, as Israelis, there's nothing, there's no liminal borders. You're either with or against, and it's today against the fascism. So it's in 12 years that I left, it became a disaster.
Yeah, thank you for this question, Asal. I felt very guilty writing parts of the book. And I felt crossing many red lines writing it. And now with some reactions from German critics or podcasts coming in, I realized that they don't see the red lines. And that's okay. So in a sense, I think I wrote the book more for you, for friends and colleagues who share this history, even if it's not the exact Iranian history, share a similar history, share a history of exile and diaspora, and only belonging to yourself and to your friends. And yeah, I still feel guilty, but I think I just have to live with it. Edward Louis said once in a book reading I went to that you have to betray your own people in order to tell your story and their story, and I think that's true. As I said, I think. Sorry.
Do you want your book to be published in Farsi?
Yes, I would love to have it published in Farsi. It would also be difficult, I guess. So I'm also very, very much looking forward to, I hope I'm going to have a book reading in the little Iranian bookshop and publishing, which is also a publishing house at the same time in Cologne, and I'm also afraid of it. It will probably be the toughest audience I will ever get. Yeah, I think more or less that's it.
A little anecdote is that when Gina Amini was murdered by the regime, I was invited to read a text, and I wrote about exactly what is sort of on stage here with us today, about how I read Mariam's essay and learned about the confederation of the students that her father was part of. And after the reading, an older man came to me and said, "I was part of that. Thank you so much." And I only knew about it through Mariam. So I guess reading is also an act of solidarity, reading stories of people who try to write other people's stories into the big narrative. It is something else to write like this. I mean, we don't write books about dating in Neukölln. Maybe next time. I could only allow glimpses into the lovely work and inspiring minds of my two guests here tonight. I'm sorry that we're ending on a bit of a heavy note, but I guess it is a heavy topic. They managed to write books on things that are very difficult to talk about. In sensitive language, in tender language, in funny language, in thoughtful language, and your act of solidarity is to read their writing. Mariam Aras, Dinosaurierkind, Marti Shmuelov, Der Preis. You can buy them outside. Thank you very much for coming.
Asal Dadan's Traumaland.
Asal.
Thank you too.